Hi, my name is Latanya, and I have the absolute pleasure of sharing my story and journey today as a proud, Black, educated woman. Proud, Black, and educated. Those three words have come to mean so much in how I identify as a person. And while some might view it as bragging or doing too much, I wear those as a badge of honor. Because being Black came with challenges, being proud, I had to work on, and being educated, I had to earn. Working hard to push past racial bias, systemic barriers, and the internalized limitations that I developed for myself. I want to share a bit of my story so that parents, teachers, and allies can do their part in removing these barriers, so that today's generation of Black and brown youth can also say these words with their chests back and their heads held high. I'm gonna take it to the beginning. I was born in Toronto, Ontario. My parents divorced when I was young, which meant that for the majority of my formative years, I was raised by a single mother who did everything in her power to ensure that we did well in school and that we asked more questions than we needed to. When I say we, I mean my three siblings and I. I'm the second oldest, and I can truly say that I adore my siblings with everything in me. They are very important to me and have been instrumental in my journey. After my parents divorced, my mom and siblings and I moved out to the suburbs, where I lived until I finished high school. Remember when I said Black, proud, educated were words that meant a lot to me as a person? Well, back in high school, still had a long way to go. Growing up, there wasn't a lot of representation of what it meant to be Black. There weren't movies like Hidden Figures that celebrated Black women who were heroes in their industries. There weren't toys like Sami, the Black computer scientist doll. There weren't the internationally televised celebrations of Black poetry, like Amanda Gorman reading The Hill We Climb on Inauguration Day. I was already Black, which meant trouble fitting in with kids who were not. So the thought of being a nerdy Black girl who loved science and who excelled at school seemed like a recipe for having an even harder time making friends. So I stopped trying. I found myself ahead of other students during exams. I would deliberately slow down so that I wouldn't finish too early. Instead of sitting up in the front where maybe I wanted to, I felt the pressure to skip class to fit in. Looking back, it's clear that it was a subconscious effort to hold myself back from my full potential. And sadly, it worked. I'd have less time to recheck my work for answers during tests. I'd miss important information while skipping class, and my grades suffered as a result. All of this not to be teased for being too smart. Despite this, I still did okay, receiving mostly B's and the occasional A, and as much as I would try to hide the fact that I secretly wanted to be a science geek, the work came easy to me. I would recite the periodic table of elements, but I can count on one hand the amount of times I studied. I remember walking into class one day, and our teacher had assigned a pop quiz. My classmates freaked out, but I didn't. And when the marks came back, I got a B+. My teacher added a note on my test and said I would have received an A if I had shown my work. Because the material was so technical, I knew there was no possible way somebody could have correctly guessed the answers. So I read her response as, "I seriously doubt a student like you did all of this in your head." She was wrong. Of course I did. But microaggressions like that further discouraged me from trying. I internalized so many ideas of who I should be as a young Black kid that I self-sabotaged to avoid standing out too much. And even when I did do well, people doubted that I could have accomplished that result. When it was my time to graduate and to select a career path in university, my gut was to pursue a career in science, but I held myself back again. People like me aren't scientists, so I chose history instead. Now, the positive part of this decision was that I ended up loving my courses, from African and Caribbean history to Northern Indigenous studies, to the ways in which the Jewish community established itself in Toronto. While my major opened up my eyes to the world and helped make me a more well-rounded person, I can't help but look back on what still feels like a missed opportunity. As I entered my professional life, I began to grow in confidence, and the connection between these words, Black, proud, educated, began to grow. As I matured, I stopped caring whether I fit into this imaginary stereotype of who I should be as a Black woman. And I worked hard, leaned into my skill set and passion for learning, and began to experience success. I would meet with recruiters who sounded a lot like some of those teachers back in school, replying to my salary goals with comments like, "Wow, a salary like that would be life-changing for you." But by then, I had a far more solid sense of self, and instead of doubting who I was, I started to love to prove people wrong, including giving some of those recruiters a second shock of the day when I told them how much I was currently making. So it has been a long road, but I am proud of who I am and where I've gotten. I also feel lucky to have married the love of my life. And in 2019, we welcomed our first and only child. While I'm finally confident in who I am, I want to turn the rest of my keynote to the youth of the future. Because as a mom, I feel a whole new responsibility to protect my son from the experiences I had, and to be an advocate for him as he faces his own set of barriers. Because let's face it, there's still work to be done. In a Forbes article I read recently, it stated that a quarter of US high schools with a high percentage of Black and Latinx students did not offer Algebra 2, and a third of these schools didn't offer chemistry. It also mentioned that STEM curricula and materials prioritize the stories of STEM contributors made by white men and minimize, omit, or perpetuate harmful stereotypes about the knowledge and history of STEM leaders of color. Consequently, 90% of districts primarily serving Black and Latinx students reported difficulties recruiting and retaining certified, knowledgeable STEM teachers. Similarly, in Ontario, an article from CBC noted that there is a higher rate of Black and brown children from the elementary school stage being streamed into classes for suspected learning disabilities at an alarmingly high rate compared to any other race, only later to find out that these students are gifted. Some parents feel strongly that the education system isn't broken. It just wasn't designed with Black people in mind. Therefore, it's working as it should. Additional data shows that Black students were 3 times more likely to be suspended than their white counterparts, according to data released by the Star from the Toronto District School Board. To give further context, it's not just at school. I'm noticing that a lot of the bias starts at home, with parents as well. I remember picking up my son from daycare one day, and I was so excited to see him because I had a really hard day. A mother of a child in my son's class said to me, "Oh my God, your son is always so loud and he has so much energy. Must be really hard for you to deal with." This was an instant trigger for me, mainly because I realized that my son was being singled out amongst all the other children in his class. Mind you, my son is the only Black child in his daycare class. So many thoughts came to mind. If this parent is pointing that out, I wonder if the kids in his class make him feel this way. I ended up responding with a laugh and said, "I don't think he's doing anything out of character for his age. And also, it's really easy for me to know when he's sick." It took me a few moments to think about the response, even though I pride myself in being very quick and witty, because I still at times wonder if I'm acting too Black. And I don't want to make things more difficult for my son when I'm advocating for him. It's a tough balance. I want nothing more than to encourage my son to be able to be his most authentic self in any situation, but I need to lead by example. I need to instill in my son that there will come a time that someone will say a comment that he may not understand, but encourage him to always know that he is a strong, Black, educated boy. Because education is power. Lack of education and the breaking down of self-esteem through racial trauma is something I will avoid for my son like we're dodging COVID. So what are our ways forward? How can we all do our part to make this world a better place for kids like my son who face systemic barriers within education and internalize harmful stereotypes that can limit their potential? For starters, I want to speak to the parents of Black and brown children. Encourage them to not be afraid to shoot for the stars, to always be assertive in knowing what it is that you want and not what others want of you. My greatest regret was taking others' opinions on my life so seriously that I would change course just to please them. Be strong, stand firm, and don't let anyone tell you that you aren't good enough. We say Black Lives Matter, which is incredibly important, when police brutality and a broken justice system constantly remind us, to them, we do not. But it's not just that you matter. Matter is the baseline. You can do anything. You can break any mold and smash any stereotype. You can be a doctor. You can be a lawyer. Heck, you can even be the prime minister if you want. Being a nerd is cool. Don't ever allow your current situation to determine your future. You are on this earth for a reason. And sometimes it may take a while to figure out exactly why, but in the meantime, be patient with yourself and don't be afraid to ask for help. There are people around you who genuinely want you to succeed and reach your highest potential. Those people can sometimes look like your parents, your siblings, your family, and sometimes even a stranger that sees greatness in you. Lastly, I want to address the teachers and the educators out there. See potential in all of your students and speak up to protect all of your students. Your Black students may not believe that they can be themselves, that they can pursue their calling because of stereotypes that they've been taught and internalized. Make sure that they can see themselves in different career paths, in different fields, and when they show promise, make sure that they know that they have your support and not your doubt. Resources help. Books, documentaries, social media accounts, podcasts, and trying to stay current in industry news that affects you. And please, please speak up when you hear both covert microaggressions and overt racism. The latter is easier to spot, but the former shouldn't be written off because they're a little more subtle. Comments like, "You're an Oreo, white on the inside and black on the outside." "Latanya, you're Black, but you're not black," can be very damaging to Black and brown folks, and it should be taken very seriously. They sure were to me, and let me tell you, it took me so much time to get my confidence back after these comments that were seemingly funny. Some folks don't know the consequences of their actions, and the person who said that to me had no idea that it changed the trajectory of my life. I searched so hard to understand why my Blackness was vilified and why folks felt that they had to reduce me to such a small place. One night when I was walking home from class, I started to cry and realized that it wasn't me that the microaggression was targeted to. It was the idea of what Black people are as a whole, but I was an outlet for that person. Once I had that aha moment, I did the first thing that came to my mind, which happened to be research. I later realized that I wasn't alone and that this idea of Black folks being uneducated, poor, and unstable was one created long before I was born. And this led to the continued confidence I mentioned in my career, which in a full circle moment is currently offering me more and more science, tech, and STEM-based related roles and responsibilities, which I find both fulfilling and stimulating as a professional. Is that fate? Nah. It's me breaking down the barriers that I could in my own life. It just took me a little while to realize them. And the last message I want to share, while it might sound corny, it really is up to us to continue to break these barriers. We're never too young or too old to shatter stereotypes by showing up as our authentic selves and achieving your version of success, in spite of the ways people may pigeonhole you. These days, I try to show up as Latanya. Latanya who likes science, technology, soccer, travel, and spending time with my loved ones. No one will ever take that away from me again. And I encourage you to protect your self-made identity with everything in you, because it is all that you have. Thank you.